right, and then I'll hand it. All right, it is being recorded. It is being recorded. You have been advised. And so let me start us off, and then I'll hand it over to the administration and the engineers, and then we'll.
I see some visuals that they cannot hear.
Can't hear me? Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Jose Antonio can hear me. Rita can hear me. Okay, good. If you can't hear me, it's on your end.
All right.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Russell. I'm your City of Miami Commissioner for District 2, which includes the area of Brickell, where the Una construction site is taking place on 25th. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for joining on short notice, and I'd like to explain why we're doing this on short notice. We received the engineering reports from the independent engineers last night, and we did not want to sit on them even for a day, and I don't want to keep this information from the public. So we're having this meeting this morning. What I'd like to, the basics of the report, and I'm but a layman, so the engineers are going to explain how they went through this, is that they are comfortable with removing the stop work order and continuing construction. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to back up and tell you how we got here. As many of you know, this construction site is digging down in what's called a soil mix, creating a tub for a deep garage near the water's edge. And they'd had 2 breaches within a month where water was coming up from the groundwater into the tub. One was a large breach, one was a small breach, but having 2 breaches in that short amount of time, we decided to issue a stop work order and hire independent engineers that are not related to the city or the developer to assess the situation. Our main concern is life safety. And what we need to convey to you as residents is that this administration has the expertise within its building department to manage this, that they are also bringing in outside experts to get an extra set of eyes on it and to give comfort to the public. These eyes do not belong to the developer. They do not belong to the construction company. They do not belong to the city. We've hired them to tell us, are we doing anything? Are we approving anything we shouldn't? Is the building construction company doing anything they shouldn't? And all of this, of course, is in the lens of the recent tragedy in Surfside. So we fully understand the anxiety, stress, and anger of the residents when they see the water coming up into the site, and they have a fear that this could be somehow compromising the integrity of that construction site or even the surrounding buildings. And so we're here with great confidence to let you know that we have never had a fear that this site was compromised. It is out of an abundance of caution that we issued the stop work order to do the independent assessment. And now we have those results. And once we have those results, and those results yield a green light basically for continued construction, we cannot hold back that developer any further. And so I wanted to hold this meeting before any stop work order is lifted, any construction begins. And technically that could have happened as early as 8 o'clock this morning. And I know exactly how that would have felt for all of you to wake up to that without having the information that you need and deserve. But it is very comforting to know that there is no major issue, and I look forward to really scouring through the report. But these independent engineers are here today to go through the basics of it with us and to answer your concerns. The full report will, of course, be available to the press and the public following this meeting so that you can completely go through this. Now, if anyone has any questions they'd like to add to this meeting that we can address, please put them in the chat. My staff will be monitoring, and as the administration is doing their presentation, I'll be looking through the questions as well. Some I may be able to answer by text, and I'll invite the admin to do that as well. And some we may bring on vocally into the meeting itself. So please go ahead, and with that, joining us, we have the building department primarily. We also have the city administration. The city manager's office is here, and of course my staff is here as well. So with that, I thank everyone for coming on this morning, and I'll hand it over to Ace Marrero, our building director.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everyone. Here in my office, as well from the building department, we have, everybody knows we have our Ron Hunt, who is our assistant director and head of structures. We have Maurice Pons, who's our building official, and we have Jose Regalado, who's our assistant director. We also have in the call, we have our two independent engineers that were retained only and directly by the city to do the independent assessment of this site. With that, I'm going to do a very brief intro. I think the commissioner has really summarized it well. I would like to say that the two independent consultants that were retained to do this work are really subject matter experts on the area that we're looking at. Both of them have extensive experience in not only high-rise buildings, but also in deep soil foundations. Which is right at the core of the issue that we were studying at the UNA site. With that, I want to go ahead and just give you sort of the highlight points of what each of those reports came back with. And I want to clarify that while both of them concur that limited work should be allowed to continue on the UNA site, we're going to maintain it's going to be limited work. We're going to still be maintaining a limited stop work order, and I'll share with you guys a screenshot. I don't know if I'm able to. Yes. First of all, let me go ahead and introduce John Pepper and Tom Mullen from PE Group and Red Eyes International. If you guys please can come in for just a couple of minutes and introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm John Pepper from PE Group Consulting Engineers.
That's the structural engineer. And Tom? Tom is on, but I think we need to give him access to unmute himself. Abigail, it can be, and there you go.
That didn't work.
Thank you, Tom. Technology is sometimes.
And Ace, could you go into a little bit about how the selection process was done for these two engineering firms?
Yes, I can. The selection process was done based on the expertise that were required to do this work. I can tell you that when it comes to the foundation and deep soil mixed foundations in the South Florida area, there's very few companies that have that level of expertise. I want to let everyone on this call know that one of those largest companies was also retained by the developer. The name of that company is Langen. They were directly hired by the contractor as an additional third party to provide an independent report directly to the contractor. But basically what we wanted to make sure that we had in place were engineers that had vast experience in the level of work that was being analyzed for this site. And that's exactly what you have before you today. Okay. There was no selection process. We relied on Ron Hunt, who is an expert on the field, to directly reach out to these companies on a very short notice and bring them on board to start the process and hit the ground running. So we essentially, these companies were retained within days of the city of Miami making the commitment that we were going to have that independent assessment. The site has been essentially shut down for almost a little bit over 30 days, and again still remains closed today. I want to go back and reiterate that the lifting of the stop work order is limited, and if you allow me, Abigail, the ability to share my screen, I want to project screen an image really quick. Perfect. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right, and basically what I wanted to indicate here is Currently, as the site stands today, about 3/4 of the site has been fully excavated. That is what you can see below construction grid line D. That is what both consultants have concluded, that is safe for construction work to resume. Beyond that point, that's essentially grid line and all the way south to Biscayne Bay. North of that, we're going to go ahead and maintain the stop work order in place. That is because both consultants have concluded that additional bracing will be required on the building that's immediately adjacent to the north of the site. We have 145. That is 145, the address to be precise. This information has been communicated to the only reason why we're here today, actually partially lifting the stop work order, is because we have communicated this to the contractor and have obtained in writing a commitment to make sure that additional bracing is provided before any work is allowed to proceed north of construction grid line D. Okay. With that, I want to go ahead and just quickly summarize the efforts that were undertaken by both engineers. First, John Pepper with PE Group. He looked at the available vibration reports. It was concluded that the levels of the vibrations that were documented throughout constructions were noticeable to humans, but not a cause for structural damage. Okay. He also reviewed the construction drawings that were available in our city department for the construction of 145 Southeast 25th Road, 150 Southeast 25th Road, and 2451 Brickell Avenue. All of those construction documents were made available. 150 25th Avenue. Yeah. All of those construction documents were made available to both consultants for their review and evaluation. Physically, they inspected 2451 Brickell Avenue towers and opined that it will not be affected by the UNA construction, as it currently is in good condition. They inspected 145 Southeast 25th Road and determined that the horizontal bracing of its south wall is required. Again, this is what I just communicated that was relayed back to the developer, and a commitment was made in writing that such bracing will be provided. We also have knowledge that they have retained a structural engineer to start developing those drawings. And again, a site north of construction line D will not be available for any construction until that work and effort is completed. The structural engineer also verified the design of the steel bracing that's currently in place, providing the temporary bracing for those walls, and it was found to be acceptable. Review the welding inspections that were done for those structural system, and it was found to also be acceptable. They were unable to inspect the property at that 150 Southeast 25th Road. However, they do not anticipate any structural damages due to the work ongoing at the UNA construction site. They also verified the design of the piles of the surrounding sites, and opined that the water intrusion which occurred will not have any negatively impact on the piles or on the steel bracing that has been provided on site. Additionally, the structural engineer also recommends that the construction south of the grid line be continued. In terms of the geotechnical engineer, who is Red Eyes International, Tom, here with us, a few of the bullet points from his report states that there are over 25 such deep soil foundation mixed systems currently employed, similar to the UNA site. This has been throughout the Southeast Florida and is commonly used on construction sites that are, on excavation sites that are more than 10 feet deep. They note that the possibility always exists for the possibility of water intrusion into those sites, and that remediation systems and procedures are very well available and effective to seal locations of water intrusion. They visited 145 Southeast 25th Road and 2451 Brickell Avenue towers. They state that while they have not had a chance to visit 150 Southeast 25th Road, it is of sufficient distance from the site so that it is not affected by any movement associated with the deep foundation work. They also state that 2451 Brickell Avenue Tower is also of sufficient distance so as to not be affected by the ground movement associated with the deep foundation work. They also inspected 145 Southeast 25th Road and again determined that the horizontal bracing on that south wall was required. Again, emphasizing that communication was done with the developer, and there is a commitment for that work to be done. And again, also concludes that and recommends that construction south of the grid line D be continued. With those informations at hand, the building department is obviously prepared to make such accommodation moving forward that work be resumed south of that construction line. But with that said, I think that concludes my presentation, and I would like to open it to any comments that the public may have.
Several of the comments come through in the chat, and the largest group of comments still has to do with the qualifications of the engineers and their independence and expertise. We weren't able to hear from Tom when he tried to get on. So I understand we've got PE Group, which is John Pepper, and if you could, and if you or they would like to introduce their specific resume, which led Ron Hunt to select them, that would be very helpful. I believe Tom still has a filter on his audio that's going to cause trouble here. It's either a bad connection or an audio filter.
So I would do a couple of things, Commissioner, when we're done with this meeting. I will share with this entire group a couple of things. I will share their the qualifications for both engineers, and I will also share a copy of the final reports that were received yesterday afternoon. Okay.
Got it. So it's PE Group and Langen, or PE Group and a separate one?
It's PE Group and Radice International.
Radice. Got it.
John, if you don't have any issues with your mic and you would like to go a little bit further in detail into your report, please. And your qualifications.
I don't think I have any issues with my mic. Can you hear me?
No. Yes, we can hear you well.
Yes, you're good.
You're well, Johnson.
Qualifications, I love talking about myself, but I'm not real good at it. I've been a structural engineer since 1976, a PE since 76, graduated from the University of Miami in 1970. I've designed a whole mess of high-rise buildings bigger than all of these, 30 and 40 stories. I've been involved in the evaluation of damage to high-rise buildings and other structures. I founded the Miami-Dade Engineer Rescue Team in 1990. It's traveled all over the world. Went with them to evaluate the damage in Oklahoma City, ending with the World Trade Center. In between, Daoli, Taiwan, Republic of China, Tamil terrorist bombing in Sri Lanka to the central bank, that's for the State Department, as well as the Al-Qaeda bombing of the embassy in Kenya, and many, many others. I've been involved in the demolition of buildings, working for controlled demolition, evaluating that process. Studied the Mexico City earthquake for the U.S. Army and the National Center of Professional Engineers in 1985. Learned a whole bunch by seeing 20 and 30 story buildings on their side and learning how building failed. The joke is, after that, my career became a disaster because I was so interested in how buildings fall down. I recently completed a term on the Board of Engineers as a structural seat, an appointment to Governor Scott. I'm currently on the Probable Cause Committee of the Board of Engineers. That's a lot about the qualifications. My report, I believe, stands for itself, but what Ace gave is a very brief outline of it. I have a whole bunch of other opinions that are in there. The primary opinion, and then the reason I'm glad we're there, is 145 has got some real problems. In addition to it's got bracing now, fully braced gravity-wise. In addition to that bracing, he said it should have lateral bracing, which I'm told is underway. Also, we said that the berm of earth next to it should not be removed at this time. Also, we've required along with the geotechnical engineers and the understanding of the Keller that it be braced for an additional level of the building floors. In other words, two above grade floors before the earth berm is removed and the braces are removed. Actually, that's before the braces are, they're going to have to work that together. We see no problem with proceeding south of grid line D. I say south, let me say Bayward, that's what I'm calling south. When I say north, I mean walk into the UNA site, look left. It's not really south, it's not really north, but for purposes of my report, I don't want to go north, west, southwest, southeast. It gets very confusing. So we consider 2451 to be to the east and 150 to be to the west. We have not been able to inspect 150, has not been rescheduled. Willing to do it at any time we can, and we would very much like to. But the purpose is not to inspect the whole building. The purpose of all our inspections was to look and see if there was damage, pre-existing damage, that would render the buildings unsafe in and of themselves and make them more vulnerable to any problems. We found that was the case in 145. We found it's not the case for that massive steel building in 2451. Don't know about 150. Would really love to see it. It was designed by one of the finest engineers in South Florida, who also designed the Fontainebleau and the Eden Rock. The design looks like a modern design. It was the only set of drawings that were really readable. It's a beautiful design. That building has been maintained in the shape it was in. It should be in good shape. Otherwise, may or may not be. We don't opine on buildings we can't see. Be happy to answer any questions about our experience, how we did our analysis, but again, report in much more detail. And I would suggest the reading of it by anybody who wants to find out what our thoughts are.
Thank you, John. I'm reading through the chat and I see several questions having to do with basically the underground foundations and how water flows through our substrate and how this affects not only existing construction, but new construction. One of the questions was, if the breach allowed water to come up into the site, did that create a void underneath, or did that disturb the normal water flow underneath that could possibly affect any surrounding buildings?
All of those questions are geotechnical questions and should be addressed to Tom Mullen. They're not.
So hopefully Tom gets his audio sorted, because it's come up several times in the questions. What was yours? Was more toward the vibration side of things? Is that right?
No, that was a minor part of mine. We've probably done a couple hundred vibration investigations of damage to structures. We published 3 papers concerning vibrations nationally and internationally, and we do work with explosives and vibrations with the controlled demolitions. I'm also a former major in the Army Corps of Engineers and trained in demolitions. Last time was 1983. I forgot most of it probably.
Got it.
But no,
so you could probably address some of these questions about vibration then. Some of the residents are asking if they can feel the vibration in buildings next to the construction. How is there not a concern? How is it possible to do this level of construction so close to another building?
There have been studies done for centuries on vibrations. And we have studied those studies, and we made our own studies with the former blasting officials, our company, former blasting officials for the city of Miramar, when they had all that blasting out there before they outlawed it. So we took measurements of our own and reviewed the measurements of both the county and geosonics, because our job was to sort of act as a policeman, more or less. American Seacoast did. American Seacoast said, if you find them spitting on the sidewalk, I want to know about it. So we, to that level, went and monitored vibrations. That left us a great deal of data from thousands of explosions and how the vibrations travel through the earth. At that time, we took that data, correlated it, got involved with one of our friends, Mark Johnson, head of the statistical department of the University of Central Florida at the time, head of statistics, Dr. Mark Johnson. And we put together some papers about how vibrations traveled through the earth. At that same time, we did studies And we found out, by the way, that they travel through the earth much differently. They do in the coal mining country, which a lot of the data from the U.S. Bureau of Mines and stuff are relying on. We at the same time studied damage criteria. The criteria of, I could give you some stuff. There's hundreds of different ones, and the levels that could cause and reasonably cause damage. Dade County then came in and followed up and did a big study, which we were not involved in. But they said that one set of data which they were using was far better than any of us. So they rely on that. And that was the Johnson Pepper McClelland data, the data that we took as blasting efficiency of Miramar. So that we weren't involved in that study, our data was used. I just know a lot about it. I learned the hard way. I've been at many blasts, but I was sitting in my house one day. It's a 2-story wood house, vibrates pretty good sometimes. And they were blasting over in a section of Pembroke Pines. I had a seismograph buried in my yard by my house because I had one and it was free. And I felt a blast, and I felt it shook my house, and I heard the air blast. And I said, boy, I got these guys now. I got them now, because that was a big one. And I went out and I looked at the seismograph, and the value of that particular explosion was 0.22 inches per second, which is far under any threshold of damage, even historical things such as old cathedrals and what have you. And I came up with the idea then that the biggest magnifier of blasting is happening in your own home. And I did a lot of studies at that time about what people could feel. And I did those studies. Some of them were standing in the field when explosions occurred. And I found that at the level of 0.2 inches per second, where there can be, no one says there's any damage there. You can feel it through your feet. You can feel it through your home. So I'm well aware, and studies were made by Siskin and others that states that humans can feel vibrations at far below the threshold of damage. And that's where our opinion on that is coming on.
Got it. Is there anything unique about our substrate that would alter your calculations or analysis based on the fact of the proximity to the water, the depth of our water table, sea level rise issues? Is there anything unique to our situation that would deem it needing more scrutiny or different scrutiny?
In my opinion, no, but the first 2 papers we published at the International Society of Explosive Engineers conventions were about how vibrations flow through a high water table sedimentary environment, such as that of South Florida, such as exactly what we're in. And they flow differently. And the equations for predicting their attenuation at different points are quite different than in coal mining country. And so our equations are being used by many people and cited in many different studies, what have you. But as for the damage level, no. And I want to reiterate that one thing to be considered, the highest level we saw was 0.505. And that is at a seismograph that is right next to the cut. Okay. As you move away, the vibrations attenuate. It's like almost like an R squared rule or a cube rule, depending on how the explosions are set. But this is not explosion, this is just vibrations.
Right,
so
John.
the vibrations would have been felt at the actual place would be less, but still noticeable. I understand why people say, I felt it. It's got to be causing damage. I understand that. And they felt it. But we don't believe it's causing damage to the main structures. I'm sorry, go ahead.
John, can you hear me now?
Yeah, but I don't know who I'm speaking to.
This Tom, I'm sorry.
Hey, Ron.
Okay, so apparently my my voice is, I'm unmuted now. And I apologize to everybody for the little inconvenience here while we're getting connected. I thought it was earlier on, and then
I'm sorry, this is Tom?
This Tom, yeah.
Okay, we heard you, you sounded like a cat or something. We heard you.
Now, can you hear me fine now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So let me see if I can go back here a little bit and talk about a couple of the questions I think that were asked. First of all, when these leaks develop, there is water inflow into the excavation, obviously. I've looked at the soil profile based upon the closest borings that I've seen at the project site, and have tried to place the mat foundations at their design location. It looks like there is a couple of feet of limestone that exists beneath the bottom of the deep soil mat, what we call the base soil mat mix. So that limestone will help prevent the flow of any sand into the excavation. If they're beneath that limestone, there is sand. So if that limestone layer becomes breached around the small hole, which is a possibility, I will admit. When the contractor went in with his grouting equipment, he inserts his grout pipe through the deep soil mix layer and down into the underlying formation till he encounters a strong or resistant strata, and he begins his grout pumping from there. So in his grouting process, he is filling up any small void that may exist beneath the deep soil mat foundation, and then he continues on up through the gap in the deep soil mix column system that was drilled beneath the site. So from a grouting standpoint, the procedure is in place that will effectively grout up any voids beneath that base soil mat, and as well as fill up and grout the leak, sealing it off. And that has been done.
Could you back up a little, Tom? I apologize. Could you
Sure.
introduce yourself and your
Oh, I'm
company?
sorry.
I was
Yeah.
going to say
Missed that part at the beginning.
Tom, talk a little bit about your experience as well and your background.
I apologize. Yeah, my name is Tom Mullen. I'm the chief engineer for Radis International. I've got more than 40 years experience in the field of geotechnical engineering with over about 40 years here in the South Florida, and I've been designing high-rise buildings since the mid 1995s. I probably have close to 100, if not more, under my belt over those years. I've done a number of high-rise buildings in the downtown Miami area, 1050 Brickell. I've also done the One Miami Centers and 3 or 4 other buildings in the downtown area for the related group. My experience is I have a master's degree from the University of Illinois, which I obtained in 1976. Like I said, I've got over 40 years experience working on high-rise buildings, primarily in the last 20, 25 years here in South Florida. The qualifications, I heard some questions on earlier. A resume was in fact submitted to Ron and the city people saying, here's my experience, my qualifications. If you're interested in engaging my services, I will be happy to help you. I have not worked for the city before in the past. I have not worked for the developer in the past. I haven't worked for the contractor in the past. So I have no, boat in the water to speak with any of the parties involved here. They asked me to get involved in this project to take a independent look at what we see out there, and I agreed to do that. But I'm not conflicted by any existing relationships with the parties involved in this particular project, having on a contractual basis.
That's great. What was the scope of what you were asked to look at?
My expertise and experience, and I've done 3 or 4 other high-rise towers with similar deep soil mixed basements, was to come in and take a look at the excavation design, the construction activities, the leakage that had occurred, what was happening out there, what my thoughts were as to why the leaks developed, and then to take a look at the surrounding properties and opine as to what I think the potential impacts on the towers and adjacent facilities might be. And so over the last few weeks, we've been progressing ahead with those reviews and evaluations and site visits. And so my primarily focus was to look at the excavation, the deep soil mix design and construction issues associated with that, as well as any potential issues from that system and the impacts on the adjacent towers and site areas adjacent to the property.
Got it. And thank you. There's been several questions about potential conflicts of interest, and I think you were very clear that you've not only have never worked with any of them, but you can confirm that you have no financial interest in any of the parties involved as well, the city, the contractor, the developer, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, and so I want everyone to understand what conflict of interest means. Just because they may have been contracted before by the same company does not develop a conflict of interest. There's very few companies that actually do this to this level of expertise. So any of the large major developers probably would have hired these firms at one time or another. But from there, the most important thing to note is that there is no incentive for the city to rush this, or especially get it wrong, or provide results that don't give the true nature of any risk involved with this construction site. And so while it's very understandable that people are nervous, especially when you can look down and see how the construction's going, our goal is to hopefully instill confidence in you that we are taking the right steps, that developer is being held accountable, and that the right inspections are being done to make sure that the plan is safe and the current progress is safe and the future progression is safe. Could either of you address why you would recommend a lifting of the stop work order south of that line, but not north of the line? What is your concern north of the line, and what is the bracing needed for?
Well, for south of the of column line D, the excavation is already open. They're actually started putting in some of the reinforcing steel and retaining wall waterproofing. So it has been stable. There have been a couple leaks, one within the deep mat area for the tower, which was the first leak that was filled and plugged, and the excavation was dewatered. The plug held, it continued. They encountered another leak in kind of the northeast corner of that mat up at the shallower parking garage elevation. These leaks occur, there's a pattern, a very intricate overlapping pattern of the deep soil columns and the grouting and mixing of the soils that occurs beneath the mat area. And they're basically an overlapping pattern. They're 10-foot diameter columns that are drilled and ground up and mixed. And these 10-foot diameter columns are all overlapped by 6 adjacent columns in a triangular type of pattern between any 3. At this particular site, there were a large number of driven piling that were left in the ground by the demolition of the previous project. Those piles, I think, are believed to have impacted the location of the drilling of some of the columns and resulted in maybe a column being shifted off position just sufficiently to allow a little gap between the overlapping columns to occur. That material is still there, there just leaves a little hole in the mat. And so when these variances and offsets of the columns occur, you can get a little gap is developed. It's not very frequent, but when they do happen, they got to go in and they got to grout them up and the voids beneath and seal them up, and then they can continue on with the additional construction. That's happened on a couple of instances now on this site. We have set column line D as being kind of control because everything at the present time seems to be stable and no leaks south of there. The contractor can proceed at his own risk. With regard to progressing further to the north, we do have some concerns with the number 145 building. That the parking garage on the south of that tower has some walls that are heavily cracked. The homeowners association there went in and installed bracing within the garage. I think that bracing was installed, as I've been told, prior to the UNA excavation work. They are under their building recertification effort, and so I think there were some inspection reports, which we have not received yet, for that building that required some repairs be made. And so they are in the process of doing that. I think this project, UNA will now assist with that going forward. But the south wall and the east wall of that parking garage are very heavily cracked, and the shoring is certainly important. One of the things is as they progress forward with the excavation north of column line D and along that south wall, is the excavation is very heavily braced. Massive steel beams and cross bracing system have been installed for the project. The purpose of those beams and braces, etc., is to prevent the perimeter deep soil mix walls from basically rotating and moving into the excavation. They provide additional strength and stability to that wall. So on the north side, the wall is braced by some diagonal bracings that are angled over to the east and west walls. The bracing is tied into a big whaler beam that is installed along the wall and actually attached to and braces against the deep soil mix towers. As we progress ahead with construction, those beams will eventually have to be released on the north tower face. The builder is going to install the first 2 levels of the parking garage, so that when they get up to the point where they need to take those braces off, there's 2 levels of parking garages in place, and there's only 1 level left to reach the ground surface, and the piles are very heavily reinforced, and we think the movements once they remove those braces have been estimated to be less than 1/4 of an inch. That being said, we still have concerns, and John can maybe elaborate on a little bit, with any even small movements of the wall. That south parking garage is placed on spread footing foundations, shallow spread footing foundations, and thus if there's any significant movement of that wall, that those footings could settle a little more, putting more stress on that wall. And so we have, the shoring that's in place right now is certainly appropriate. We want to make sure as we go forward that we're bracing the columns to the tower on the south side of the tower, so that if there is a little bit of movement of that wall, if for some reason they crack further and degrade further, we don't want any issues with that garage wall and the parking garage itself to impact the tower. So John, you might want to elaborate a little bit on the bracing, but it's the developer has agreed to go in and take a look at that and have a structural engineer evaluate it and provide some designs for bracing the wall. We certainly don't want a surf side to develop in any way, shape, or form here, but I think you just got to recognize going forward here that the condition of that south parking garage is not good. It's highly cracked, and from what I've heard, the 40-year recertification is requiring some improvements or remedial actions to that wall.
Tom, you may want to remind also that the walls that are around the perimeter are just temporary walls. All of those need to be the permanent wall has to be formed up and poured. So maybe you might want to provide a little bit of a description on that as well.
Yeah, like I said, I've used this system on other major high-rise projects. Right now, the most recent one is the Estates at Aquilina project up in Sunny Isles Beach, where we had a 2-story underground garage and some deep elevator shafts that were constructed using the same technique. Essentially, the deep soil mix wall, once it's installed, they come in and they shave the inside circular face. They're reinforced with massive H-beam steel, and they'll shave the face of the wall off back to the face of the H-beam columns that are installed in these deep soil mix diameter, which either are, I think they're 20 or 36 inches in diameter. Most of them are 36 inches in diameter. And then they came in, dug down a little bit, came in and put the big bracing system in to restrain those walls. Ultimately, once that face is shaved down, they come in and use that as the backside face for their forms to build the walls for the structure. They put in a waterproofing layer that it gets applied to the wall. And then the reinforcing steel for the wall goes in with an outer form and it gets poured. I think I saw a question there. Did we have any leaks or failures at the Aquilina project? No, we did not. We did have, similar to this project, some concrete piles that were left in place that were ground through, but we did not have any leaks that occurred. Now, that being said, the deep soil mix is it's not a fully impermeable material. It's not like having glass or some other highly. It is a concrete soil mix, so there is some seepage that will permeate through the material, but it is a very low permeability material. and any minor seepage as well as rainwater that enters the excavation gets picked up by a gravel layer that they place on top of the deep soil mix material before they start laying in their bottom concrete and rebar. So it does naturally seep through the material itself outside of any leak areas. So there is a system and a mechanism in place for removing that water as well as any rainwater that enters the excavation.
Thank you. Question for either Tom or John. Were all of the inspections done under your scope visual inspections, or were actual new soil tests done or any core samples done for this inspection?
From our standpoint, no, it was just a visual inspection of the site. John looks for certain things. I look for certain things. The things that I look for were, obviously we've talked about the 145 project, but as you know, are there any signs of movement adjacent to the sides of the excavation on the adjacent properties that would impact some structures? There is some cracking on 25th on the east side of the roadway that might be considered associated with some sort of a movement of a retaining wall, but the cracks look very old. And so I believe they predate this construction activity. They also extend well north of the project site. So they may be associated with some earlier work or utility or any, some other installations there. On the east side, on the 2451 side, there's some tiki huts that are leaning there. I'm not sure that they're associated. I don't believe they're associated with the excavation. There are some other vertical poles that exist there, light poles and the playground and some exercise equipment that are not leaning towards the excavation like the tiki huts are. The base of the tiki huts are highly eaten away by insects. The diameter of the piling is reduced. You can physically see, the rotting that's taking place and the insect that's taking place. So those tiki huts are moving. I'm not sure I don't believe it's associated with our site at the present time.
What about the cracks in the deck around the tiki huts? I have only seen the pictures of those.
There is some cracking. I would expect if cracking or separation of the paver block would occur, that it would occur in a direction that parallels the excavation of the Una site. Simply because if there is any movement of that wall, it would be to the west, and so any cracks that would open up would be in a north-south direction, and they would open up in an east-west direction away from the pool. There is some separation of
that's
walkways.
if you're saying if the crack were a result of the retaining wall leaning,
Right.
that would almost pull it away from. Is there anything else that can cause an unsettling of the soil underneath the deck that would cause a different type of instability?
Well, from the existing borings to the Una site, I see that the site, adjacent side Una site, is underlain by some organic peats, and how those things will continue to settle and move over many years. There's a lot of cracking of the concrete cement that they use to contain the paver blocks. I have those same type paver blocks at my house, and fortunately my concrete border that I put around it cracks all the time, and I'm not anywhere near such a building. So I think the cracking, at least that I observed from my perspective, appears mostly to be just normal, what I'm going to call wear and tear and activities. But there are some separations, and in the report I include some photographs of the paver blocks, but they're not in a direction that I would suspect or expect to see associated with the Ona project. But that doesn't mean going forward, those internal bracings that they presently exist in the Una site will be removed. On the east and west side, they'll be removed once the first floor is poured. And so that those retaining walls will go from what we call a pin brace connection that we're currently looking at to that of what's called a cantilevered wall, where the top of the wall is actually free to rotate a little bit towards the excavation. So I do expect when they pull that that bracing system out, that those walls will move a little bit, and there may be some ground cracking and some movement of the adjacent properties. Those movements will typically occur within a distance equal to, the depth of the excavation adjacent to same or less. So the excavation is about 40 feet deep. So, we would expect to see any cracking and movement associated with that project to be within 40 feet of the wall. The tower there, I think as best I could measure off Google Map, looks like it's about 65 feet east of the unit site. So I think the tower, which is pile supported, is beyond any potential zone of movement associated with that wall. Similarly, on the west side of the project, the number 150 tower is probably 125 feet or more west of the Uner excavation, and it's far enough away. It's also supported on deep foundations. It's also far enough away that it will not be affected by the Una deep zone.
Just to reiterate what you said, because I think this is very key. So if you take the depth of the excavation and you create a radius around the excavation as a potential area of impact for soil movement or cracking, and if the structures of concern, the neighboring towers, are beyond that 45 or 50 foot radius, you have no concern about that excavation or the construction or the vibration or the water movement having any effect on those towers. Is that correct?
Right. The zone of movement follows what's known in our technical practice as an active earth wedge formation behind the wall. That's basically a diagonal wedge that propagates from the point near the lower part of the wall that's embedded and propagates up at an angle towards the ground surface away from the wall. So it's actually a wedge that develops adjacent to the property with a maximum distance at the surface equal to that depth of excavation.
Got it. Because you can understand, even though this construction is going under the newest technology of everything available to us, the older buildings around aren't necessarily from this age. And so they have concerns that vibration or movement could affect their structures. And following Surfside, there was concern that the construction of the new building next to Champlain Tower South could have affected the integrity of the foundation or the piles. Is this something that you've considered in this scenario?
Different issue there, although I'm not engaged with that project. John is, but I'm not. They drove a large sheet pile wall along the northern portion of the adjacent property in between their property and the Champlain Towers. Now, the impacts of that wall, I think, were monitored. I don't know what the vibration data was, but it was subject to much different vibration conditions than what this deep soil mix construction entails. There is it's just a different scenario from a vibration perspective.
Got it. Next question, and Ace, maybe this is one for you. So 150 did not get inspected, and I've seen several comments about why that did or didn't happen. They were asking for some sort of waiver to or affidavit to give solid confirmation that there are no conflicts of interest. Were we denied access to 150, and do you expect to get access to 150? Is there a concern you have legally regarding the documents that are requesting?
We have no concern. We've been asking for access since day one.
They say, if I read, and I don't know if the people in the chat represent the building formally, but what the comments are saying is that they were denied access for lack of signing a document, and that document would pledge that there is no conflict of interest either on the city's side or the engineer's side.
I personally haven't been involved in that process. I think it's been controlled by the city. So
yeah, I'm asking Ace.
Yeah.
We'll send that, but we need to create that.
Is that correct, Ace? Are you familiar with that? About
I am. So we'll go ahead, and if there is an affidavit that they would like the engineers to to sign. We can circulate that to the engineers and have that discussion. We definitely want to visit the site. So
Good. So we'll keep John and Tom on board in order to take care of that. Is that correct?
that's, if necessary, that's what we'll do. Yes, absolutely.
Got it. But there is no concern at this point for lack of that access, that building is at any risk based on this construction.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. I've gone through, there's a lot of commentary that I'm not gonna repeat or get into, but I'm trying to make sure I catch all the substantive questions. And some of them still go to asking why there is no actual boring testing to compare soil samples now to pre-construction to see if there's been movement or concern in that way. Can anyone address that? Why is a visual inspection sufficient at this point?
At this point in time, the time is short here. We have an excavation that's sitting out there that they're desiring to get ahead with construction on. I mean, it can sit there for some time, but it just, that excavation gets in a better condition once they get it excavated and start placing the mat and the concrete in there, because then load gets added to the bottom of the foundation area and placed up on the sides. And so the excavation condition only improves the quicker they can get back to construction and start placing loads in the bottom of the mat area.
Got it. And so what you're basically saying is the sooner they can actually shore it up and create the garage shell itself and the cantilever system, the better it is for all surrounding stability. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, did your scope include analyzing the future vertical construction and how that might impact neighboring soil stability?
It hasn't at this point in time.
Okay, so
haven't
your
been asked to
scope was
look at that.
restricted to the excavation. Is that
We're
correct?
focused on the excavation at this point in time.
Got it. All right, so Ace, let's talk a little bit about access to the documents and timing of the next steps. How can residents and the press get a hold of these reports?
This, as soon as we're done with this meeting, all of those documents will be available to everyone on this call. 100%.
Where can they find them?
We will provide a download link. That's probably going to be these are large files, so we'll probably provide a download link that will have the qualifications for both engineers and the final reports.
Where would they be able to find that link? Will it be in the building department's portion of the City of Miami website?
I need to have the discussion with IT, but it will be available through a download link.
Got it. So I'll make sure that the different HOA representatives that are here from Brickell Homeowners Association, as well as the independent building representatives, all have access to that link. Will that be up today by chance, Ace?
I'm very confident that it can be done today, yes.
Good. And then what was my other question for you? The stop work order itself. When will the residents expect to see construction resume, and what sort of construction will they see? There's been some concerns that during the stop work order, there's been violations of that stop work order. So folks would like to know what was allowed and not allowed during the stop work order and why, and then when the stop work order will be lifted, when they will see new construction.
The contractor, while the stop work order was in place, the contractor was allowed to do cleanup and make sure that the site was secure. So you saw some activities to make sure that that was indeed taking place, make sure the site was secured and again safe. No construction, to my knowledge, no construction activity actually took place during that time. Going forward, once we amend the stop work order, the only activity that will be allowed to resume is construction work, again, south of construction line D, which is and I'll also provide a copy of that image that I showed everyone at the beginning of the meeting. So you have at least a visual of from which point construction is allowed to proceed. But if we the easiest way to visualize is the area that has not been excavated will remain unexcavated. And the area that is excavated is essentially the area that will be allowed for the contractor to resume work.
If let me qualify that a little bit more. There will be a little bit of excavation allowed further north to get north of the deep mat. I think that excavation.
That was an area that had been, thank you, that was an area that had been previously excavated. It was only backfilled as an effort to plug the last water breach.
All right, so I just wanted to make clear there will be some excavation activities at the site, but it's, as you've indicated, it's what has been completed to date. And those walls and that excavation, other than the leaks, have been standing out there for some time now. They're heavily braced and they're in good shape. There's no issue that I'm aware of those walls structurally failing in any way, shape, or form. They look solid. They're heavily reinforced. And one other point I'd like to make, this deep soil mix concept creates what's called a basement or a bathtub type effect. It's basically subject then to water pressures that they're going to try and uplift it. It's like putting a boat in the water. You push it down, it wants to pop back up. So that hydrostatic pressure is wanting to push it up. That hydrostatic pressure is being counterbalanced and held down by the augured cast in place piles that were put in beneath the foundation. The design has been looked at and checked, and it is adequate, and it's performing well also. So like I said, this excavation system has been used on more than 25 projects here in South Florida to date. The designs are fairly comprehensive and I won't say standard, but the approach is well known. They're done, they're stable, been successful on a number of other projects. And short of addressing the leak issues and the concerns that we have going forward with the number 145 building, there's no reason for the work not to continue to proceed at this point in time.
Tom, a question about 145. One of the comments mentions that there are cracks on the floor of the garage that are not old, that a family has been documenting the cracks evolve throughout the UNA construction. Have you inspected those, and do you have any comments about those?
We have been inside the building and walked around. There are some cracks. There's a couple of joints in there. The walls are extensively cracked. I don't think I particularly noticed when I was in there, a significant crack. Doesn't mean that one didn't occur. I think you also have to remember that there was a building that pre-existed the UNA site that had a basement in that excavation. Were some of these cracks associated and the cracks in the walls associated with the prior building? I can't comment on that. I don't have any specifics on it. I can tell you there is the old retaining wall for the garage for that old project still exists. It's located along the south edge of the footing for that parking garage. And so that was a driven vibratory wall that was installed in the past at some point in time, right next to that footing, that shallow footing. And so I can say based on experience that sheet pile driving would have had impacts on that garage area. The deep soil mix column that has been put in by the present contractor is located south of that, but immediately adjacent to it. So I guess as far as that, those cracks are concerned, John, did you recall seeing any of those? John, did we lose John? Okay.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, I've been trying to unmute for a while, but it wouldn't let me. May your question was correct. Yeah, I saw a whole bunch of cracks in 145. I saw the cracks in the floor. I saw lots of cracks in the wall. I saw settlement cracks indicated the foundation was going down. I saw a whole bunch of stuff, and I was very pleased that the building was vertically shored. One of my requirements, or in order to continue construction, in our opinion, being safe, was to get it laterally shored also and to leave the earth berm. We have great concern for our 25 Brickell. It's got a crippled wall at the end. It's not a good thing. As for the cracks, I'd be happy to take a look at anything anyone has to say the cracks are brand new. I don't really want to get involved in evaluation of the cracks because I feel that's working for UNA. I don't work for UNA. I work for Miami. I don't serve two masters. I don't want to be involved in the evaluation of whatever damage may or may not have been caused by UNA. What I want to do is the same thing that I was hired to do, and is try to keep these buildings safe. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not evaluating cracks. And if they were there before, great. If they weren't there before, what we're recommending will take care of the building until such other matters work themselves out.
So
I also want to mention one thing. Okay, I just want to mention
Right.
one thing, if I may. I immediately answered the concerns of 150 with the stuff to Ron Hunt saying I agreed to sign whatever they wanted to sign. So I'm not holding back. I wanted to get out there.
I agreed. So what you're saying in essence, though, discovering cracks is not that doesn't raise a big alarm for you. That you're saying that's a natural thing that happens during construction to neighboring buildings?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that my evaluation, okay, I don't want to
Your
get
scope
involved.
ended in some way.
I don't want to get involved in an ethical conflict of working practically for UNA by saying what cracks might be caused by them and what cracks weren't. I am interested in life safety only. I've come into 145. We have some life safety problems. I have addressed them. Could worry about who cracked what later. There's a lot of engineers. They got one out there, one or two engineers out there. I would have liked to see in fact, I asked for the 40-year recertification report from an engineer, and they also had another engineer out there that I've known for 20 years, and I asked for his report, and I didn't get either one. And that doesn't bother me that much because we're going to protect the building in spite of itself. We're going to get it laterally shored, going to keep it vertically shored, going to keep the berm in place. We've worked out modifications with the contractor to make it a safer wall by going an additional level before taking the braces out and holding the piles. That particular edge of the piles is by far the safest underutilized piles in the building because it's got two braces rather than one. And that's about it. So it's not that I don't care. I don't care when that crack formed. Other engineers will be able to tell you the crack is there. I can see it. I take notice of it. I take notice of the cracks on the wall. I can see the old repairs, like the ancient repairs, like anyone can, but I can see some recent movement too. But that's not my job. My job is to try to protect the building, and that's what I'm doing. In spite of
The older buildings or the new building?
the older building. I don't care if the new building
Okay.
falls down or not. That's not my business.
I'm sorry, I'm just not fully.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just trying to translate what you're saying for everyone so that I'm clear. So you recognize cracks, and some of those cracks could be concerning within their own right, but you're not making the correlation of cause and effect. You're saying, okay, I see crack. I'm noting these cracks, and I do have concerns, but you don't feel there's any concern with continuing construction with regard to those cracks.
Not as long as our recommendations are followed, which
Got it.
are leave the vertical bracing in, put lateral bracing in, do not take the berm away, and pour 2 floors to attach to the piles before you take the bracing out. That way I protected that building. That's after that, it's not my job.
Got it. So Ace, this goes to us as a building department then, with regard to the other buildings that are experiencing cracking. How do we assess those to make sure those buildings are safe?
I have assessed all the buildings.
Oh, you've assessed them and you feel they are safe. I'm sorry, I'm hearing you say it's not in your scope to assess that part.
No. The only one I'm not getting involved in is UNA. Okay, I'm interested in the 3 buildings around it.
Got it. Now I understand.
I had an appointment to inspect 150, but that was canceled due to the condo's concerns about having people there and this and that. Still like to inspect it to make sure that nothing is happening like happening at Champlain Towers. I would hope if I walked in there the day before, I would have seen some bad stuff. Okay, and we're all reacting to that. Okay, I've inspected many buildings since then, mostly buildings I've designed myself because they called up and said, "Can you help us? You designed my building 30 years ago." And I go out there, and then I'm fortunate they're in pretty good shape. All I care about is the buildings on the outside.
I hear you, and I appreciate you coming on here because I know it's not normal and traditional for the engineers to be within the scrutiny of the public eye with regard to questions like these. But I think you can empathize with everyone's concerns.
Oh, I do. I do. I was horribly shocked
Everyone is going to become a armchair expert on these issues because they have concerns for their own families and the safety of their own buildings. And so, you know, we're doing a higher level of scrutiny here and transparency to make sure. Normally, these things would just happen administratively, right? If the building department had a concern, they want to hire an engineer, and they issue stop work orders, release stop work orders. But because we're surrounded by folks that are looking down into this hole every day, we do have to address their concerns and have the right bedside manner to make sure that they have comfort, because their peace of mind is part of my job. And so I really appreciate you guys coming on here, and I'm sure we'll continue to work together to try to get access to 150 and make sure that that one is safe as well. Ace, is there anything else that we need to cover or discuss before we sign off?
No, not from the building department.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. I appreciate the process that's been done. I apologize that things went hasty, but like I said, I would not wait to have this meeting. Once we had the results, I wanted everyone to get access to them as soon as possible. And I don't want anyone to be surprised by the partial lifting of the stop work order or any further construction. I know you all still do have concerns, and I understand that. We will continue to be as transparent as physically possible. There's some comments, Ace, about previous requests for different reports and studies. And I want to make sure all of them are made available to everybody. Anything we have, either through links, wherever you put them. I imagine they should be on the building department section of the City of Miami website, which is going to be available to everyone. And I apologize for all of you that we don't have a link for you here right now today, but we will transmit that both through our office, social media, and through the HOAs as soon as it's available today. So thank you everyone for your questions and your comments. And I'm sorry I didn't address every single comment, but I think I got to all of the substantive questions that were here with regard to the safety and the methods used, the scope, the independence of the engineers and their expertise, and the timing of the next steps. So with that said, you know, you all have access to me, and I appreciate all of your advocacy. So thanks very much. We're going to end this meeting now, and I look forward to continued conversations with all of you. Everybody take care. Everybody take care. Have a good holiday.